Well, hello everybody out there. It's time for another free flute lesson, and I'm excited. This is the fourth in this series. So if you haven't seen the other ones, you should go out and check out the flute lessons. They're actually up on my YouTube page at youtube.com. Native music enthusiasts. You search that, you can actually find our flute lessons. They're about a half hour long each, and they're packed with knowledge that you can learn more about the flute and how to be a better player. My name is Enoch Chapman from Native Music Enthusiast, and I love the Native American wood flute, and I love talking about it, and I love instructing people on it. I've been doing it for quite a long time, and it's a great little thing. I love music. I think it's fantastic, and I love this flute and I love this instrument. So hopefully, what I can share with you is help to be able to get you to be better players and improve as performers, and that's really what we're looking for. So, our fourth flute lesson, let's kind of jump back a little bit and recap some of the other previous lessons just so we know where we're at and know where we're going. Back in lesson number 2, we introduced the names of the bottom holes of the flute. So remember how you hold your flute. It's very simple. Your strong hand goes on the bottom and your weak hand goes on top. And we talked about the lower notes of the flute. So these 4 notes. Now it's first position where they're all covered, second position where the first hole is uncovered, third position where the 2 holes are uncovered, and then fourth position where the open holes are uncovered. And that's the idea of the notes of the flute. And that's how we looked at them when we were talking about how the flute notes and the names there are. So we have hold our flute like that, and then we do first, second, third, and fourth position or open position of the bottom hand. And remember how we talked about the musical alphabet starts at A and goes up to G and then goes back to A and rotates on that type of scale no matter where we are. So A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, or C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. You notice how we just go back from G to A, we just kind of rotate through. And that type of same idea is what creates all of the musical scales that we know inside of all of our musical knowledge, which is cool. The flute, when we have our anchor finger, and we talked about the anchor finger, how that finger just kind of stays there, plays a pentatonic scale. Unlike the regular scale that you hear with piano or saxophones or clarinets or flutes or whatever the other instruments are, where you actually go up the entire scale like C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. That's called a diatonic scale that has 7 tones. And I wish if I didn't have a flute, I could show you 7 tones. But with a pentatonic scale, you only have 5 tones, and you're skipping 2 of the tones. Don't worry about what tones you're skipping right now. I'll help you out with that, so you don't have to worry about it in your head. But you are going to be skipping 2 tones in the pentatonic scale. Now, that's important because this flute is tuned to a minor pentatonic scale, which means that the very first note that you hear, or that you're going to have when all the covers, so in first position, the very first note you're going to hear is the name of the flute. And this flute is a B flute. You can see by the back of the flute it has the letter B on it. And every flute usually has some sort of designation. They try to tell you what the name of the flute is. Doesn't necessarily always mean that. This one is an A flute. You can see that by the back. I have other flutes here, like this one here is an F sharp flute, and again, you can see that by the back. All flutes will have some sort of key that they're tuned to. Now, whether or not they are shown the key, that's entirely up to the flute maker. I have a couple flutes that don't have the keys on them, but I know that they're a G flute and that they're tuned to be a minor pentatonic scale. So the minor pentatonic scale is important in learning the names of the flute, because what that means is our very first position is the name of the flute. Second position, however, skips over the next letter and jumps to the next letter afterwards. So if I was a C flute, I would jump over D and get to some sort of E. If I was an F sharp flute, I would skip over G and get to some sort of A. If I was a B flute, like this one is, I would jump over C and get to some sort of D. Now I say some sort of D because it could be like a D flat, it could be a D sharp, or it could be a D natural. Those are kind of some of the choices that we have. There's actually other choices out there like D double sharp and D double flats and all sorts of really weird types of accidentals, but for the most part, we deal with one flat, one sharp, or natural. And as we start talking about the idea of the pentatonic scale, it's important to know which type of notes we are talking about. So we do have here as our first position, all holes covered, we have the name of the flute, that's B. And then I jump to this, which is some sort of D. I jump over the C and I get to the D. And that's my first position here, or second position here, is some sort of D. And it's actually going to be a D natural. Okay, so D. And then we go up to our next note, which is going to be some sort of E. then to our next note, which is going to be some sort of F. And in the B flute, it's going to be an F sharp. Now, don't worry about accidentals and everything like that. I'll help you through that as you go along. But it's good to know that when you start talking about flutes and you start talking about positions, is the letter of the name flute. That's the first position. Second position is jumping over the next letter and getting to whatever that letter is going to be. So here it's going to be a D. Then we're going to have an E. Then we're going to have some sort of F, which is here an F sharp. If I go to my A flute, I have A. I jump over B and get to C, D, E, and it sounds like this. And you can hear that there's a little bit of a jump between the first and the second note. There sounds like there should be something else inside there, but we don't have it right now because that's part of the pentatonic. And that's the A flute. In my B flute, again, we have those same notes. B, then we're going to go to D, then E to F sharp. Now, again, if I go to all my other instruments, like my G flute, right? If I go to G, all my fingers covered, that gives me the letter G. Then I'm going to move this, which is going to jump me to some sort of B. Good. Remember, we go G, jump over the A and get to B. Then we have C, and then we have D. And this B here is actually going to be a B flat. So in the key in the flute of G, it's going to be a G, B flat, C, D. That's the key of G, okay? If I go to F sharp, we do this one more time, right? F sharp. Now, all fingers covered, that gives me F sharp. If I uncover my next finger, that gives me, remember, we're going to jump over the note, and we're going to get to the next note. So we're at F sharp, we're going to jump over G, and get to A, some sort of A, then we're going to go to B, and some sort of C. And in this case, it's going to be a C sharp. Again, I'll help you with all the accidentals, so you don't have to know all that stuff, but it's just the letters that we're worrying about right now. So F sharp to A to B to C, or C sharp in this case. And that's the letters of the flute. And that works for every flute. Again, if we start, with A's and G's and F sharps and B's, we've seen that pattern over and over again, but it works for every other type of flute. If I have an E flute, I will start with an E. I'll jump over the next letter. So the next position is going to be a G of some sort. An A is the next one. And then a B. E, G, A, B. It's important to remember that that's the pattern that we use when we're talking about the pentatonic scale. That we have these notes that we start off, and then we jump, and then we move on to whatever the next notes phrases are going to be, or what the next position is going to be. Those are our notes that we have. So we're going back to B. Ready? B. Then we're going to go to D, E, F sharp. Perfect. That's how our notes work on the lower hand of the flute. And that's what we talked about in our lesson on our second lesson, was really the kind of understanding the notes of the flute and how those kind of notes work and why you can create patterns and how you can create melodies and out of those just very simple 4 notes. A lot of the etudes that we have written for the Native American wood flute deal with just the lower hand, or they're just dealing with those 4 notes. And we've created 20 songs that just deal with those 4 notes. And if you want to take a look at it, check them out, go take a look at our YouTube page, because our YouTube page has all of our songs on there and a lot of the free accompaniments that we have for each of our songs. If you want to purchase them on sheet music and other things like that, you can play along with it. But those songs are out there for you to play and study effectively with those 4 notes. And that's kind of interesting because you can do a lot with just those 4 notes. Okay, so now that we talked about that, let's talk about what we talked about last week. And last week we introduced the concept of the metronome. And the metronome here is really important. Now, this is my metronome, and it's way more of a metronome than any one person needs. It just is. It's a great metronome. I love this metronome. This is one of my favorites. I had this when I was growing up as a percussionist, and I kept and I bought one a number of years ago so as I can keep practicing, because I love this metronome. It's called the Dr. Beat, or the DB90 from Boss, and it is a killer metronome, but it's way more of a metronome than any one person needs. Okay, all you need to do is go out and get one of those like $10 metronomes or maybe $15 metronomes at your local music store. Those little cheap versions are not, they don't, not cheap, but inexpensive. That's a better way of saying it. The inexpensive versions, because that's all you really need. You don't need anything this chunky. This is just huge and chunky. But metronomes are great because what metronomes do is they keep track of time. And this one, I'm just going to turn to 60, which I love. It's one of my favorite beats. It's just beats per minute is 60, and I just hit the start button and it clicks. All it does is just click, and that's it. It's as simple as that. It's just a clicker. Now, why in the world would you need something like, you know, this metronome here if all it is clicks? Well, there's a couple other reasons, because this one has a couple different indications, which is really nice. And some metronomes do, right? Some metronomes have I'll do it with the right finger. They'll have a little light here that clicks and shows you the actual, you know, click of where you're at within the beat, or where the beat is. And some of them have this little oscillator that will wave back and forth and tell you where the beat is, so you can kind of gauge and measure where your beats are. The cool thing about this metronome is it does subdivisions for you. So I want to, you know, could be quarter notes if you know music theory, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. But say this could be quarter notes, and maybe I want to practice an eighth note. So I just want to bring up the first subdivision. This actually has the subdivisions inside of it, which is really nice. Allows you to have that extra subdivision. If I want to go down to 16 notes, I could do that. So I now have my second subdivision, which is great. If I want to do triplets for some reason, I can do that with this. If I want to actually stress the 4, so, you know, set this to, I think this is actually this is a 3. This is in 3. So I don't want to stress the very first beat, you know. This actually can do that. 2, 3, 2, and you can hear how that's a little bit different. So this metronome is great because of all those different types of functions. It also has a whole slew of MIDI stuff to it, outputs and inputs that if you want to sync up with your decks and your control decks for recording. This is just a great metronome, powerhouse metronome, but you don't need anything like this. But you do need a metronome. And I do recommend going out and getting a metronome, even if it's nothing more than a metronome that you can put onto your phone. There's a lot of different apps out there that you can get for your phone that are metronome apps. I don't think I have any on my phone right now, but there's definitely some ones out there that you can get. I love Boss as a technology company. I think they're fantastic, and I really do love this metronome. There's all sorts of other really kind of cool things to go along with that as well, but you don't need to worry about. But this is a great metronome. Now, metronomes are fantastic because all they do is click. And we talked about the idea of beats per minute. So when I set this metronome at 60, what I'm saying is I want to have 60 beats per minute, or roughly what I'm saying is I want to have a click a second. Right? 60 seconds in a minute, 60 beats in a minute, 1 click every second. That's the idea. Let me grab some water real quick. Perfect. And that's the idea, is the metronome will actually keep track of that time for you. If I want to go up and I want to say, let me go up to, you know, faster. So maybe I want 100 beats per minute. And now my metronome goes faster and keeps track of that time for me. And it's good because sometimes when we keep track of time, we speed up and we slow down depending upon what's happening with our hearts, what's happening with our minds, what's happening with our bodies, is you will speed up and slow down. Even the best of musicians who say they have perfect time, which is really kind of things that we don't really all have. It's because of the idea of being able to control their tempo. They've been playing this long enough that they know where the tempo sits, right? 60 is kind of an easier time to find because it's a beat per second. 120 is 2 beats per second. So finding 100 gets a little bit trickier because you're like, okay, maybe I go 120 and then just go a little slower. Well, a metronome will keep track of that for you exactly. That's the thing that's cool about it, is it just keeps track for you exactly. You don't have to worry or play the guessing game of, is this right, is this wrong? So I love the metronomes for that reason. And I'm just going to bring it back down to 60. just so we can get that click going. And we're going to keep it going because that's what the lesson was about last week, was the metronome, making sure that we understand where that beat is and starting to internalize that beat as performers. Because when we perform with a beat, things sound a lot better than if we just went willy-nilly by ourselves. We want to have things that are just a lot more solid, a lot easier, because the audience will appreciate it and they'll like it a lot better. So if you play with a metronome, you're able to have that kind of control involved that you don't necessarily have to worry about on your own, right? It's not in your head that I have to worry about. It's here to be able to play. Nice, right? I mean, it allows you to feel like you're actually in control more than just playing notes, which is really important. Now, with this type of setup, okay, when we start talking about the metronome, we start talking about the beats, it's really good to understand and internalize for yourself a number system or a counting system. In the world of music, like sheet music, we have these already in place. We have the idea of quarter notes, half notes, whole notes, eighth notes, 16th notes. We have these concepts already in place. When we're just kind of playing like this, there really is no whole note or half note or quarter note or any of that stuff that goes along. It's just the beat. But understanding these type of notes, understanding that these notes exist out there will be really helpful, especially for you to play in the long run, because it will help you create this idea of, I know what to do, when to do, how to do things, and make it flow throughout the course of a beat or song. And that's important, okay? So let me just put this on mute real quick. When we're talking about note types, and that's really what we're talking about, is the idea of note types. When we're talking about note types, it's important to know that there are specific note types out there and different note types that exact rhythm values for us. Now, the biggest note type there is not necessarily the longest, but the biggest note type there is this concept of a whole note. And a whole note is just a note that looks like just a big circle. It's really all it looks like is a big circle. I wish I was smart enough to actually put up graphics for you so you can make sense and you can see it, but I wasn't that smart enough to do that and prepared enough to do that today. So we're just going to know it that there is just a large circle. Maybe I can find inside one of my pieces of music the idea or the example of the whole note. I'm pretty sure I can. Give me 1 second and I can show you what I am talking about with the idea of the whole note. Now, again, the whole note, oh, here is a good example, and I'm hoping you guys can see that. Right at the end, right here, at the very end, is the whole note. And notice how it's just a note that is, there is no staff to it. It's just a big circle. That is the whole note. And in rhythm, in theory, like music theory, the whole note is 4 count. Well, let me step back. It's just the largest note we have. You really don't have counts until you actually put some sort of context into why you would count that way. And the context inside of music is what we call time signature. And time signatures, they're important because they allow us to understand how many beats we're supposed to count, what type of note gets the beat. And time signatures are shown by having 2 numbers on top of each other. And let me see if I can show that to you. You'll see that here at the very beginning over here, that there is a time signature right here. This is 4/4. And 4/4 is a very common time signature. It's actually called common time because it's so common. 4/4. And you'll notice that there are 2 numbers here. One on the top, one on the top, and one on the bottom. 4/4 time signature. Now, those numbers mean something. They're actually important into the designation of how we count rhythm. The top number is the number of beats inside of a measure or inside of a grouping of bars. And so if I do that again and I show you my 4/4 time signature, I will show you here. There's 4/4 time. So what that means is inside, see if I can get this so there's no like, so 4/4, okay? So what that means is inside each of these bars, see how there's a bar at the very end and then there's another bar at the very end and then there's another counting. Each of those bars has 4 beats inside of it. That's that top number. It has 4 beats. The bottom number tells you what type of note gets the beat. And in context of 4/4, the bottom number tells you that the quarter note gets the beat. The quarter note is represented by the number 4. Okay, now we're going to jump back because I talked about how the largest note type we have is the whole note. And the whole note is just that note with a, no bar or line or staff inside of it. It's just that big little circle. And what that is a whole note. Now, the whole note is represented by the number 1. Whole, 1, whole, just whole. It's the entirety. It's all of it. It's the major one. It's the one. Okay. The next note type that you have is the half note. And I could show you that half note by, again, opening up my music and getting to another piece of music. And you can see here, trying to get so there's no glare, no glare, no glare, no glare. Darn lights. Okay, so here you'll see that these bars all the way over here have, that's a quarter note. It's a note with a filled in with a little staff, and then the one at the end, this guy over here, is a half note. It's looks like a whole note, but it has a staff. So it's a little open note, but it has a staff. That's called the half note. That's represented by the number 2. Whole, 1, half, 2. Quarter notes look like half notes, like they have a little the head, and then it's got a little bar on it, but the head's filled in. And that quarter note is represented by the number 4. After the quarter note, we have an eighth note, which this is where notes start getting a little bit easier to understand, a little bit easier to read, because all we do is we add on stabs afterwards. So if I showed you this here, okay, you'll see over right here, this note right here is an eighth note. And the eighth note is a note. Eighth note is a note that looks like a quarter note with a little flag on it. Okay. That's an eighth note. Eighth notes have flags. Eighth note is represented by the number 8. A 16th note looks like an eighth note, except instead of 1 flag, it's got 2 flags. 16th note is represented by the number 16. So you'll see that these note types have number representations. A whole note is the number 1. A half note is the number 2. A quarter note is the number 4. An eighth note is the number 8. And a 16th note is the number 16. Okay, why is that important? Because in the time signatures, we have that top number, and then we have that bottom number. The top number is 4, and the bottom number was 4. So we have a 4, 4. The top number tells you how many beats are going to be within that measure, within those 2 lines, and that's going to be 4. And the bottom note tells you what type of note gets the beat. 4. We know that the quarter note is represented by the number 4. So there's 4 beats in the measure, and the quarter note gets the beat. And that becomes important because as you start playing, and let's just say we're going to put our metronome back on again and have it start clicking again for us. So as you start playing, you will hear this beat. And let's just assume we are in 4/4. Because if we're in 4/4, all of a sudden now we can have that strong beat. And then we know that there's 3 beats afterwards. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And each of these are now quarter notes. Quarter note, quarter note, quarter note, quarter note. And if I want to go twice as long, if I want to do a half note, it's 1, 2, do, do. Remember, the half note is 2 quarter notes. It's the number 2, right? So the half note actually is, the quarter note is 2. It's like the half note split in half, right? The whole note is made up of 2 half notes, which is each made up of 2 quarter notes, and a quarter note is made up of 2 eighth notes, and the eighth note is made up of 2 16th notes, and the 16th note is made up of 2 32nd notes, and the second note is made up of 2 64th notes, and the 64th note is made up of 2 128th notes, and the 128th note is made up of 2 56th notes, and the 2 56th note is made up of 5 12 notes, and 2 5 12 notes is made up of 10 24th notes, and 10 24th notes is 20 48th notes, and 28 48th notes is made up of 40, and you get the gist, right? We can keep going smaller and smaller because we can always break things in half. That's the idea. That's the concept. So the whole is that's the granddaddy. That's the origin. That's the starting point, right? And the whole is represented by the number 1. We break the whole note into half, and we get 2 half notes. Those are in number 2. Those 2 half notes can be broken in half again, and out of the 2 half notes, we get 4 quarter notes. Number 4. The quarter notes can be split up again, and out of the 4 quarter notes, we can now get 8 eighth notes. Number 8. And the eighth notes can be split up again. Whoops, music falls. Eighth notes can be split up again in half, right? Into 16th notes. And out of the 8 eighth notes, we get 16 16th notes, right? The number 16. And you can see how that number has become along as we kind of break things into halves. The whole note gets broken into 2 half notes, gets broken into 4 quarter notes, gets broken down to 8 eighth notes, gets broken down to 16 16th notes. And all that is kind of works within this context of time. 4 beats in a measure, the quarter note gets 1 beat. And understanding that, we now know that 2 beats is a half note and 4 beats is a whole note. And yes, you can do 3 beats and you can do 1 beats and you can do half beats and all the other stuff that goes along with that. And yes, there's lots of ways to be able to count this out. But we're talking about just sticking to the straight beats right now, right? So if I was to play whole notes in this click, I would play a note every 4 beats. And so I'm going to play whole notes going up the scale of just the lower hand, not all of it, okay? 2, ready, go. And that's just playing up the scale, playing whole notes, 1 note every 4 beats. I can do the same thing for half notes, right? 1 note every 2 beats. And that's playing half notes. Now I can play quarter notes every beat. Half notes. Out of breath. Half notes again. 2, ready, go. And if I want to do whole notes, I just go for every 4. And you can practice your exercises now utilizing those type of note types. Can I play whole notes? Can I play half notes? You'll notice the whole notes have become very, very tricky, especially trying to do all of them in one breath, because now you're playing for 16 beats. And if you haven't done your breathings to kind of engage your breathing, then you're kind of going to be missing out. And we should have done that at the beginning. We should have done the little breathing exercises. But man, we were running short on time, so I wanted to get into this. But when you start doing your breathing exercises and learning how to inhale and exhale and get the best breath for you, you can do those whole note mentalities on the flute. And that's important, right? Note types are important because as you're playing sheet music and as you're learning how to play other people's music, it's learning how long they hold things out for, how short they hold things out for, where the breaths come in, all sorts of stuff, and all that has note types. Along with note types also comes rests, and rests are the way that we insert silence, as we insert silence into music. And inserting silence is just as important as inserting music. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on in other lessons when we start talking more about the idea of like reading music and getting flow and form and everything like that. But today we just really want to focus in on those note types. So let's recap real quick. Note types are the ways that we put context to the length of music that we're playing, right? It's the way for us to understand that this note has gone on for this long and that I can play that again, or I can replicate that by understanding first the beat and then understanding the note type that you played. Beat is important because beat will give you the solid foundation of the flow of where that rhythm is, but it's the note types that conform to the beat. The largest of the note types is the whole note, and the whole note again looks like just like a big circle with nothing filled in. It's just a big circle, and the whole note has a number representation, and that representation is the number 1. The whole note can be split into half. And if we split into half, we get 2 notes, and those 2 notes are half notes, and they look like the whole note, except they actually have like a bar or a little flag, not flag, but they have a little bar that sticks up. So that's the half note, okay? And the half notes are represented by the number 2. Half notes can be split into half, and those halves are called quarter notes, and they look like a bar, like the the little note, but they have a little bar attached to it like that, so they're kind of like a bar, yeah. And it's a quarter note, and quarter notes are represented by number 4. And again, we can go smaller. Quarter notes can be split into half, and we get eighth notes. And eighth notes look like a quarter note, except they have a little flag that hangs off of it. And that little flag shows that it's an eighth note. And the eighth note is represented by number 8. Eighth notes can be split into half, and they're again look kind of like eighth notes, except they have 2 flags instead of 1 flag. And so now those are 16th notes, and the 16th note is represented by the number 16. That's going to be broken again into 32nd notes, which can be broken again into 64th notes, can be broken again into 128th notes, can be broken into 256 notes, can be broken again, and keep going smaller and smaller because we can always break notes into half. That's the nice thing about math, is we can always break things into halves. So note types allow us to understand where the rhythm comes from. In the context of rhythm, we have a time signature that tells us what the context really is. 4/4 is what we call common time, and this is one time signature we see a lot of. 4/4. The top number tells us how many beats are going to be in a measure, and the bottom number tells us what type of note is going to get the beat. So if I do 4/4, the top number says we're going to have 4 beats in the measure, and the bottom number says it's going to be the quarter note that gets the beat, because the quarter note is represented by the number 4. If I was to do like 4/1, we would have 4 beats in the measure, and the whole note would get the beat. If I was to do 4/2, we would have 4 beats in the measure, and the half note would get the beat. If I was to do 4/8, we would have 4 beats in the measure, and the eighth note would get the beat. The note on the bottom tells you what type of note gets a beat, while the note on the top tells you how many beats are in the measure. And that's the important thing to understand within that context. Now that we know that, we can start practicing and playing with these notes and these note types. Right? Those are playing quarter notes. Half notes. And then whole notes are every 4 beats. We can also go faster if we want to. We could do eighth notes. We could do 16th notes. We can go 30 notes. I'm not going to do that because that's way too fast, but we can keep going slower, faster, 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 or slower and slower, right? We can build up and understand where those note types come into play. So now our exercises that we play, the skips and the jumps and those things that we introduced beforehand, can be maybe fleshed out a little bit more because we have inside of it the beat and this kind of rhythm context going on. And that's important, is to understand like the rhythm context of the flute and of music in general. So that's where we're going to leave ourselves today, is understanding a little more about rhythm, having that rhythm context inside. We learned about beats, we learned about note names, we've learned about note types, and next, what's going to happen next time, who knows? We're going to have something maybe really exciting, and maybe put this all together into some other kind of cool concepts so that you guys can play. Just so you know, Get Vocal's going underneath some cool development stuff, so I might not be able to use the Get Vocal, but if I can't use Get Vocal for my platform because they're doing some development work, which I'm really thankful that they are doing, and I'm grateful to announce that they are doing development work and that we may or may not be able to use this platform. What I'm hopefully going to do is, if I can't use Get Vocal, we will still do these lessons free and still record them and still get them out there for people to play and along with. So just so you know, the platform might change, but we're still going to be doing everything like we normally have been. So thank you so much for coming along and being part of all this lesson, and I hope you learned something from it. And I hope we'll see you next time, because we're keep moving along, we're keep getting new stuff, and it's getting exciting because now you're going to start learning how to become better performers, better players, because of just all these kind of cool foundational things that you've been going through. So thank you so much, and I hope you guys have a great day.